It's interesting that you mentioned midlist, because I'm a midlist author, and I think, or at least that's how I would describe myself. I have said that to other people, funnily enough, and they've said, you're not a midlist, but I think it's all relative, isn't it?
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Conversation with your host, Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you've had a good week. Last week, you would have noticed that I dropped a brand new episode of a new part of the Conversation podcast called Coffee Break. And the first author to join me for a coffee break was Helen Monks-Takar, and we were talking about her new book, The Marriage Rule. And this was just a sample coffee break because Coffee Break will officially launch in season 4 of the podcast, and season 4 will start in September. However, I did want to let you know, because I had such a great response to the Coffee Break episode, you all really enjoyed it, that I have another 6 scheduled for you. So I will be dropping these 6 Coffee Break episodes throughout the remainder of season 3. So you won't have to wait until September to hear them. And you will hear from one of the authors who is actually the inspiration for the Coffee Break segment of the podcast. So I'm really looking forward to dropping those episodes and hearing your response. Now, as I like to say, let's get on with the show. This week, I'm in conversation with best-selling author Amanda Jennings, and her new novel, Beautiful People, is out now. And in our conversation, Amanda Jennings and I talk about how she went from aspiring architect to passionate writer, turning rejection into motivation, and how those nighttime inspirations make it into the final book. Now, as always, sit back or go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Amanda Jennings, welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Right, my first question, Amanda, is how would you describe your publishing and writing journey?
Oh, it's hard, isn't it? Because how would I describe it? So, I didn't ever have sort of aspirations to be a writer. I was one of those children, those Gen X children that had all their essays come back with loads of red marks. You don't know anything about grammar and you can't spell these hundreds of spelling mistakes, please. I used to always have to do spellings written out underneath essays and stuff. They came back with great ideas and wonderful imagination, but you really need to learn how to use a semicolon or whatever it was. So I ended up doing A-levels that were sort of less writing oriented, so geography and art and French and maths, and went to university to do architecture, and then basically was a dreadful architect, like really bad, very uninspired or very uninspiring buildings, and all my contemporaries had these incredible buildings with sweeping roofs and incredible things. I always say mine had 4 windows and a door and a chimney with some so I wasn't a very gifted architect, so I basically just moved. I was at Cambridge, where you could just switch courses quite straight. It was a straightforward process between modules, and I basically swapped to history of art, and there I had to start writing, and I loved writing. So that was what got me into writing, I guess, sort of realizing. And also I am a terrible procrastinator. I leave everything to the last minute. So I wrote a 15 or 20,000 word dissertation with about a week to go. Coca-Cola, everything, chocolates, all the way through the night just to stay up for. But I did I did very badly in my actual degree, but I got a first in my dissertation, and that's when I really sort of realized that maybe I did like writing. So and then we jumped forward to me having a baby I got pregnant when I was 23, unplanned. And I loved being a mum. I adored it, but I wasn't very enthusiastic, shall we say, on the things that went with being a mum. So I was dreadful at laundry, dreadful at tidying, dreadful and my husband had sort of gone off my boyfriend at the time had gone off to start his career, and all my friends had left university and they were all doing these incredible things. And I was sort of sat with this beloved child who I didn't want to leave, but also feeling very, joking aside, feeling very unfulfilled and a little bit like I had become stuck in a life that I hadn't really planned. So that's when I started writing to keep myself going. And I sort of had this bizarre conversation where it sounds very unfeminist and back in that day, I sort of felt like I had to justify myself, but I sort of said to Chris, would that be okay if I wrote rather than go slowly mad at home? So every time my baby fell asleep, I started writing, and ended up writing a book, which wasn't ever intended to be published. It was literally something to keep my head level and give me something else to think about while I was with my baby. So I went off, and then and we ended up going to America for a year when she was about 3 years old, and I wrote another book out there. I said, this is what I'm going to do, and that was the one that I sent off to agents back in the day when you did it with elastic bands crossed around
yes.
the manuscript. I remember going off to Boston to a post office in Boston, and with these three, because I could only afford to send, couldn't afford to send all of them off. And sent them off to agents, and that's where it started. I don't actually know why or where I got the idea that I would try and get these published. I think I was probably just slightly assumed that I'd written the book, and that's what you did.
Well, that is what you assume. You think that you've written the book, you spent time writing the book, you've written the end, and you've got all these pages. Well, naturally, the next step is it's going to be on the shelf, so you're just going to post it off to an agent, and then you'll get a publishing deal, and it'll be like magic, and people will be buying it.
Yeah, listening to you talk like that, this is like a flashback to how it was, because you're so wet behind the ears, and you haven't sort of been jaded yet by the process or by the industry. And I just remember, I remember sending it off and being very excited about which one of these people is going to sign me, which one of these people is going to give me this deal, and it's going to be exciting, which one is going to say, I could not put your book down, and this is everything I've been looking for. And obviously it's not what happened. I am one of those authors. I definitely wasn't an overnight success. I have a lot of rejection, in the back history, but I kept on. And I think what I loved about it was, I went on to, I just kept writing. I just felt it was really, for me, it was a very compatible way to raise my children. I wanted to be at home. I did try. There was a story with my first child where she was about a year old, and I decided I wanted to have a bit of time to myself and to do something to try and pursue a career, because everything had come to a bit of a stop. And I put her into a nursery for a couple of hours, and I sobbed for the entire 2 hours time.
Did you really?
And then when I went to pick her up, they had had to hover in the kitchen with someone holding her. And when she saw me, she just lifted her little arms, went like that. And this lovely lady just looked at me and said, I don't think either of you are ready for this. I said, I don't think I am. So I think for me, the writing just became something that allowed me to be the type of mother that I obviously wanted to be, or at that time. And it facilitated that for me. So I was very lucky to be able to do that. It was a gift, really, to do that. And sorry.
No, I was going to say, did you ever feel like you was missing out on something though? All those years when you'd gone to uni and you said writing hadn't even been on your mind at all, because it's like you'd done everything else before you decided this is the thing I'm going to do. But I always feel like there's something in you that's like, something's not right. There's something missing.
Yeah, I think that's such a really, insightful observation, because actually, I did used to wake, and I don't know, again, I think it was all sort of helpful for my headspace, and this is how I dealt with various things, but I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would literally bolt upright, and I would write poetry, or I would do a painting.
Really?
Yeah, like in a sort of, I wouldn't let you read the poetry, you would absolutely laugh. It was all that very sort of pretentious young person, 18-year-old stuff that I did. But it was that sort of, I think there was definitely something that wanted to come out of me. And actually, even though you are right, because even though I say I didn't have dreams to be a writer, my childhood, my home, my boxes that my mother has kept from when I was a child definitely include all those sort of books that are made from little pieces of paper stapled together in little stories. So I know that is, in the back catalogue of most of us who write, we all did do that as a child. I just didn't have the confidence in my technical ability to write. I think that was the thing.
Well, it's going to be hard though, isn't it? Because, you know, I'm Gen X. Well, I think I like the summer Zennial, but I just feel I'm 77/Gen X. But like
Oh,
firmly
so
in
the
it.
coolest.
Yeah, I'm firmly in it. But I do even know, you know, when you're talking about being in school and you
Mm,
do your essays, and I was talking about this with my best friend because she was like, they do all their homework online. It's like, there's no books, everything's online. And we were
yeah,
saying, you know, when we did our homework, it was all in our exercise books. There was a strict criteria I had to follow in my Catholic school. You know, make sure you put the date and the title and underline the date. We had to double underline the date and title in red pen.
yeah,
And strict criteria. And when your work came back, and it did come back with all those and it wasn't even just like thin red pen, it'd be like a thick
yeah,
like crossing out the mistakes, circling the misspelt words, and then when they gave you 7 out of 10 or 8 out of
yeah,
whatever, and then their, you know, their little comment, their critique at the bottom. And if
yeah,
you're if you're getting your work back, you know, as a kid, and it's covered in red,
yeah.
it will probably it does lead to that insecurity where maybe I can't do this.
Definitely, and I think actually that I look at that now, and I think it was, you know, when I've done workshops in schools, the first thing I say to the children, I mean, you know, I've done sort of primary school workshops and things, and you sort of go in and say, the first thing I want you to know is there's no wrong answers today, nothing. It doesn't matter how you spell, it doesn't matter how you phrase something. For me, it's all going to be just going to talk about telling stories, and I think. Obviously, you get to a stage in secondary school where you do need to know, because you're at school and you need to know. I'm not suggesting that we throw all rules and
I know.
in actual fact, I should probably just stop talking, because what I really wish is I could go back to my 16-year-old self and say, just learn how to use a semicolon. It's fine. Just learn. It'll
I
be
still
fine.
don't know how to use it properly. I just chuck it in there and just hope for the best.
So yeah, but I think there's an element of, certainly I was a bit of a, what you'd probably describe as a jack of all trades, and I those subjects where I didn't have quite so much pushback, where I'm a bit lazy, it's sort of the path of least resistance for me. So where I was getting, you know, as you've just said, the sort of 8 and 9s out of 10 rather than the 7s and 8s, it was just a natural drawing to those subjects. But in a way, I am really grateful for my route into writing. I'm grateful for a lot of things, for being in that stage in life. I always say that had I had my child and access to social media, blogging, bits and pieces, I don't think I would have written a book. I think I would have
Really?
I think I would have been very happy to sort of get my affirmation, because I was quite, back in the glory days of Twitter, when Twitter wasn't as it is now, I would spend a lot of time sort of searching for the gag, searching for the joke, you know, trying to get that. And I think I would have found that a very attractive, because it's hard work writing a book, isn't it? You know, you're sort of there, and actually to be able to do that while you're bringing up children, it requires determination and grit, and you have to sit down day after day. And whereas getting that quick sort of dopamine hit, I guess, was what I was after. That's what I lost when I was in my basement flat with my child at 23. Was I lost that sort of the dopamine hits, I guess, that I'm quite addicted to.
I was going to say 23 is young, but I think my mum had me. She was pregnant with me when she was 20.
Well, yeah, I mean, funnily enough, it's not actually. I think it was young for as you've mentioned, you know, going to university, and I always sort of, you know, I said that we were. I don't know how I would have addressed this, so it's more of a solution-less observation. But I do think that we weren't told that at some stage you might have a family, you might have a child, and that is going, you know, how will you balance your expectations on yourself, your potential, with maybe feelings that you're not necessarily expecting. No one had ever told me that I was going to have this feeling for my child at 23, this sort of, yes, I just always assumed that I would work. I come from a long line of working women, funnily enough. I'm very, very privileged in that. My great grandmother was the first, apparently legend has it, family law has it, the first qualified female optician in the country.
Really? Wow.
My granny went to university and was an optician. My mum was set up a sort of women in architecture style collective when she was working in London in the 60s. And I sort of came from this environment where women were, my granny especially was like, well, women have to be financially independent, women have to be independent, we have to, you know, she was full of that sort of, she told me once a story about how she did she was doing a physics exam at university. Now, this must have been, I can't quite work out the date. I probably should have had this before I tell the story, but she was born in 1915. So let's say just after the war, she must have been at university. And she went in to do a science exam, and all the men in the room, she was the only woman, all the men in the room, including the examiner, turned their chairs to face away from her. So she was...
No, they turned their back.
They turned their back on her as she walked in and sat and did the exam. They'd all just slightly angled their desks away from her. So I sort of grew up with this idea that that's what women did. My granny drove, for example. My granddad never drove in the car. She always jumped in the driver's seat and drove. It was that sort of... And then I was faced with this bizarre sort of situation where I sort of flipped my own world, because I suddenly then had to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was a bit like, oh, how is this working with me? So yeah, I'm probably a bit confused.
It's like but you know, if you've grown up, because I think about my own like women in my family, very, very strong women, very independent. And the very notion that you would be reliable on someone else or even a man just to get through the day, I'd be like, what? Like, no, this is not who we are. Even when it came to driving, like my mum, as soon as we turned 17, me and my two brothers, my mum's like, you need to go and drive. You're going to learn to drive, because it's just about giving you that next step of independence and not having to rely on anyone or anything. But then it's like you went from one end of the spectrum to the complete other end.
But then I did, my sister had a similar experience, and she did exactly what I did, funny enough. She started to sort of say, well, fine, this is how I'm feeling, but how can I sort of balance these two bits of our makeup, I guess. So she became a garden designer and trained as a garden designer, so she could work also around having the children. So I think it's interesting. I mean, it's only interesting on a sort of superficial level for our family, but it was interesting to me, the questions and the sort of doubts I had about my feelings and whether I was doing the history and the women in my family a disservice by not sort of pursuing the careers that I'd wanted to pursue.
There's so many different ways in which we can put pressure on ourselves, and sometimes without even realizing it, because you're looking at your family around you, you're looking at societal pressures, because especially in that time, a certain, well, I'll say all of Gen X, society is saying to you, well, you can do anything you want. There are no restrictions on who you can be and what you can do. And also I think Gen X is supposed to be the rebels as well.
Exactly that, I think. So exactly that, funnily enough, Medina. So I had a situation where I didn't want to get married, because we obviously got pregnant, unmarried. We were with him for a long time at uni and stuff. But I didn't want to marry, because I didn't want everyone to think that we were only marrying because we were pregnant. So that was my first rebellious stance, which was that. And, I still believe that. I didn't believe that our relationship was a piece of paper. I had all these arguments that went around. And then I had to get passports for the kids. And the kids, because that's my daughter now, funnily enough, doesn't agree with taking the name of someone that you end up with, or she said her children will have her name, but I did that very traditional. We were a little bit confused, weren't we, back then? It was a sort of, I know that I should rebel, but of course my children will have my boyfriend's name. Why would they not? And I had to go traveling with them, and I was told that I would have to take a copy of my marriage certificate to prove that the children were mine, because they didn't have my name, they had his name, and that if I was traveling alone with them, people... I guess I made up, the suspicion would be that they were somehow not mine, and I was absconding the country with my children.
No, but
so that then prompted me, this rebellious sort of, I will not, bow down to societal expectations and marry just because, suddenly became okay, and I changed all of that just because I didn't want to be seen to be. I wanted to be their mother and have the same name as them. So we're talking about names a lot at the moment in our family, because Ella, is my eldest daughter, is really questioning it as a sort of, she's like, she's sort of got into that stage where she's looking back through history and said, but it's just an ownership thing, Mum. It's just
you're chatful.
All my friends are getting married and they're not thinking about it. What do I do? And I'm like, oh, my precious child, just go with it a little bit, relax.
But the baby thing, you're talking about, they assume that you would be absconding with this child doesn't belong to you. It happened to my cousin. And she was young. Yeah, she was young when she had a child as well. And she'd gone to Florida, and the baby would have been, I think she would have been maybe 1.5 at the time. 1.5 years, I think 18 months. And she'd gone to Florida to see her parents. And then I get a call at silly o'clock from immigration. And she's on the phone. And they're saying they don't believe that the baby's mine. So I had, and also it's the different surnames as well.
Yeah.
So I then had to go to her flat to find the birth certificate and then FedEx the birth certificate.
Oh my goodness.
Over. Yeah. Or FedEx or fax it, one of the two. I think I'm sure I FedExed it actually. It was something crazy. No, maybe it was fax. But yeah, and fax it over. That's in order for them to, because they were not prepared to let her into.
That's why I got married all those years ago.
So it does, it sounds a little bit, it would never happen. But it can happen. It can happen. Because other people make assumptions. So when you went to America for the year and you said you wrote your book, and you're talking about your manuscript and posting it off. Do you ever watch Romance in the Stone?
Yes.
It's so random. And
I just had years, but yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for years. But when Kathleen Turner, I can't remember her character's name now, but Kathleen character's Turner, she's the writer. And she goes off with Michael Douglas to find her sister in Colombia. Was it in Colombia? And where would they go? But I just remember this scene when she's like, she finishes the manuscript and she puts it all together and it's this big, thick manuscript and she posts it. And then her editor's reading it, flicking over the pages, and her editor's like, she's like, oh my God, this is like amazing stuff. This is at the end of Romance in the Stone. So, sorry for a spoiler, but you should have seen it by now.
Maybe that's where it comes from, because I definitely love that film. And I wonder whether that's the thing that we were all thinking of when we were packaging up. Because I remember wanting to get even the elastic bands in a really, okay, this is showing my OCD probably, but in a very neat square so that it looked perfect, and sort of putting it under, and then maybe even tying some with a ribbon. That was that sort of, it was a very, I miss those days of putting huge manuscripts into envelopes. Actually, then you have the reason why you were obviously waiting to hear 6-7 weeks to hear back, whereas now it feels like you should be hearing back immediately because email is so.
But I think that's the thing. It's like it goes off into the ether, whereas before you in your head you could see this. But I say this virtual slush pile, and you could just imagine the journey of your manuscript from your desk to the post box to someone else's desk. And I just think, that whole Romance in the Stone and Kathleen Turner's writer journey and finishing her manuscript, I think that is the romantic view that a lot of writers have in their head from the beginning, which is why you just assume as soon as it's done, someone will give you the deal. And you said you will be the next big thing. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen straight away. No,
and I think that's a really that's a very often felt thing. I've talked to a lot of friends about this, but I had it was my third book that was published. I have one that will never see the light of day. I equate it to me a photograph of myself in the 80s. I'm sure I looked great at the time, but no one is reading that book, so we'll just put that away.
We all do.
Although sometimes when I'm looking down the abyss of starting a new book, I do wonder. I was like, I wonder if there's anything in that first book I wrote. I wonder if a quick tidy up might. I mean, my secret. I say my secret library. I do that with short stories. If I'm commissioned to write a short story, and I'm like, I find them hard to do. I need to stop saying that. I need to be more positive. But I do find short stories hard, and I was like, God, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? So literally all my assignments that I would have done on my MA, all those 1,000 word assignments, I go back and I'm like, that is a good story. That's such a good idea, though. That actually makes sense, doesn't it? Because as they say, no word is wasted. So you are definitely doing that. But I definitely remember that sort of moment where my agent said, "Are you sitting down?" And I just got back from a dog walk and I was putting the dog into the boot of the car and I had my really muddy wellies on, and I was like, I sort of lied to her and said, "No, I am sitting down. I wasn't." I was perching on the thing, and she goes, "You're going to someone, they want to publish a book." And that moment, I remember sitting in the car and gripping the steering wheel. Bearing in mind, this is probably 15 years ago. I still remember it really viscerally, very vivid. Holding the steering wheel of the car and just going, "This is it. All my dreams come true. This is, and I saw Sunday Times bestseller, and this is dating myself. I saw an interview with Wogan. I just, it was that sort of what the world is now my oyster. It's just, I feel like a door is going to open up into this sort of hallowed world of published authors. everywhere I go, my book will be on the shelves. And I think I love that I had that feeling. I love that I had that feeling. I mean, it's not a feeling that happens again, particularly when you get your next day. You're like, okay, here we go. Yeah.
No, but I think you need that. I think every writer needs to have that feeling and to have that romantic view of it in the beginning, that you can be everything. Because I think if you are fully aware of the reality, it's not like when you're like 5 books in and mid-list and you're just thinking, is it you're looking at your royalty statement and it says 0. You're like is it worth it?
Is it worth it? I think it's interesting that you mentioned mid-list, because I'm a mid-list author, and I think, or at least that's how I would describe myself. I have said that to other people, funnily enough, and they've said, you're not a mid-list. But I think it's all relative, isn't it? Because to some authors, your success will seem larger and what they're achieving, and then you're sitting, you look at the people above you and go, well, no, I'm nothing, they're so I think you have to sort of, that's what I have learned as I've got older. I'm now just about to start writing hopefully book 8, and I have definitely now, I appreciate that, although I am now much more ambitious than I perhaps was before I got my first book published. At the same time, I am very realistic about that. I know it's not just about hard work and talent, for want of a better word, or, I know there has to be, there are certain ley lines that have to cross for things to happen. So I think I just now take a very good writer friend of mine said that she now just writes to the next contract. And that's where I am now. I'm sort of thinking, if I am lucky enough to be able to keep doing this and to be working with a publisher with an editor, then that's what I'm, it's a job at the end of the day. I don't have to be on Graham Norton to validate myself or whatever that is. I think it's there's certain, I'm at that stage as well where I kind of am starting to think I would love to diversify a little bit. I would love to start maybe thinking about scripts, because that's kind of where we didn't mention it back when you asked me about my publishing journey, but it was a script that sort of got me first notice, for want of a better word, and I do wonder whether that's something I might return to.
So how did that happen with the script?
So I did manage to so we spoke a lot about how I didn't want to leave my baby child, but I did, obviously, when she became a toddler, I was lucky enough to find myself writing as a researcher at the BBC, and I really loved that job. It sort of worked around, I did 4 days a week, and I loved that. But while I was there, I sort of became aware of something called it was called BBC Talent at the time. I believe it's now called the Writers' Room, and they were doing a sort of shout out for sitcom scripts. So I wrote a sitcom script back, between work, between my child's having naps, and sent it off, and I got shortlisted. I think there was probably, I think they said around 2,500 scripts entered, and I got shortlisted down to the last 8. And as a sort of not prize exactly, but as an acknowledgement of that, I got to meet Paul Mayhew Archer, who wrote Vicar of Dibley, and he wrote with Richard Curtis, and I went to have a meeting with him, and he said, if you were in America now, you would probably be invited to join a writer's room. You would now, as a junior writer. And he sort of said, well, but here we don't have such things, but we will make sure that if you ever wrote a script, it wouldn't hit the sus pile, it would be read. So that was a fantastic thing. It was an affirmation of something, and I just thought, well, now I have something to pin my working to. I went back and I sat in my car and just went, but I've put every single one of my jokes in that half an hour script.
I've got nothing left.
There's no more comedy in me. I have no more ideas. But it did make me realise that I did love writing, and it made me realise the type of writing that I wanted to do. I wanted to, I'm quite sort of an optimistic, sort of jolly person. Everything to me, I try and see, I laugh far too much. I have no gravitas. I know that about myself, and it does annoy me, but I've tried to be serious and interesting, and I can't be. So I go for the cheap gags all the time. But actually, I love writing. I do love writing those sort of emotional, psychological thrillers. I love putting people through the ringer. I love seeing how they cope in dark situations. So,
listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. This next question I'm going to ask you, I'm trying for it not to sound rude or offensive, but when it came to the script, did you know what you were doing?
No, not
because
at all.
It's not a natural,
no.
Writing a story seems to be more natural than writing a script.
So that's a really interesting thing. So I can't even actually remember the process that I used. I mean, I look back at myself when I was that age, and I don't know whether it's the arrogance of youth, but I just did stuff without overthinking it. Now I would overthink, even going shopping, I'm overthinking stuff, to God, tell me I've got people over for dinner on Saturday, and I can start thinking about what I need to cook for them about a week before. And do I have, whereas then I think I just sort of said, yeah, sure, you just write a script, you write, this is what someone says, this is what someone says. So I think I just went for it, because there definitely wasn't any of the script writing tools that you would now have.
No.
I think downloaded. So I think I imagine they probably gave me instructions and said, write dialogue like this, or I managed to look it up somewhere. No, I don't actually know the answer to that. I definitely did not know what I was doing. No. I mean, I'd done a little bit at school and university, a little bit of writing skits and plays and directing that. So it wasn't that I was a total, out of the dark to it.
Yeah, because I'm even, and it probably is the arrogance of youth. You just think you can do anything. You think you're going to live forever, and you think you can do everything and anything. And I remember being at uni when I went through I'm going to be a script writer, I'm going to make films phase. And I was writing my film scripts, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was just writing a script.
Yeah.
I didn't, and the only reference point I could remember looking at is I remember Reservoir Dogs. You could buy the screenplay.
Yes.
I think Faber published them, and I still got it downstairs. So I bought Reservoir Dogs, and I bought a couple of others. But I was just reading it. I didn't have to teach myself.
No, I think that's I think it's, going back to your question about how I did it, I probably had plays that I had rehearsed at university. I probably had the books and the scripts of the plays. So I'm probably quite used to, because I did a lot of drama. If I had an opportunity to be in a play and not work, I would do that. I think I probably just understood the structure of dialogue, probably more. And also, I think for me, the thought then of writing 90,000 words, 100,000 words book would be, that's not in your capability, but writing 30 pages of dialogue probably was a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
So I think, and it was only when I sort of sat down and said, no, I'm going to use this every time a child falls asleep, I'm going to write. And so I need a project that had that longevity, I guess. I guess.
You're talking about word counts, and I remember when you were talking about your dissertation earlier, and you remember that back in uni, the thought of knowing that at the end of this you have to write a 10 to 15,000 word dissertation, and it just feels like a massive mountain. Like, how on earth am I going to do this? And now as a writer, you're expected to deliver these, I'm saying 90,000 words of a novel.
Yeah, and I think it's. Yeah, no, I think you're right. The word count thing is, and I think that's probably what stops. So we, as I've mentioned, I'm just about to try and start writing the book 8, and I'm on that what I view as a sort of precipice. I don't know whether it's a precipice looking down to the abyss or a precipice looking up to some unscalable mountain. They both feel equally daunting, and I've sort of, I know what I want to write. I don't write. I'm a pantser rather than a planner, so I don't have a detailed sort of set of directions or directives for me to write. I just kind of sit down at the first page with notebooks behind me, so I'm sort of ready to do it. But I do think it's that daunting 80,000-90,000 word draft heading at in front of me does feel a little bit off-putting, very, very off-putting. So
it's that whole staring at a blank page, isn't it? Because whether you're a pantser or a planner, so everyone knows now I'm very much a planner, but still staring at that blank page, whether it's a notebook or on the screen, and you're thinking, how am I going to fill it? Because now I need to I need to put some kind of a story down. And you may have a character and you may have a scene, but it's still a daunting prospect of, expanding on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said be it a planner or a pantser, depending on who you are. So I don't know about you, but the more I've spoken about this at, in interviews and at events and stuff, it's sort of, back in the day I would have said absolutely a pantser. I sit down, I haven't got any idea, I have some stepping stones and I just write until the end. And actually now I think that I'm actually wondering now whether I'm actually an uber planner, and my plan takes the form of an 80,000 word draft zero, because I rewrite so many times. So because I think you rewrite a bit, don't you, as well?
Yeah,
right,
I do. So my agent won't see mine. No one will see that first. They probably, I reckon they see about version 4 before they.
I'm version 3 probably, or possibly version 2 if we count draft 0 as 1. So the third.
Yeah, maybe third.
Yeah. And I'll show my husband probably draft 2, I think, sort of just tidy it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Hope that he then says, this is amazing, off it goes. He's never going to say that. He's yeah, you've got some work to do, which is the worst thing he can say. Or, hopefully you're going to add in some magic. That's the second worst thing he can say. But I do now wonder whether that my plan just looks like a book, because I will then go through with my red pen, or I'll shift round and I'll take scenes out and I'll big scenes up. So I do now wonder whether actually this planning/planting thing is all a bit of a myth, and that we all just have the same, a different way to get to the same point, which is readable first draft.
I feel like I'm learning lots. I'm learning new things this week on my podcast. Yeah, because I was talking to an author yesterday, and I don't even know how we came on. We was talking about being an extrovert and introvert, and I don't know. I think I don't know whether I asked her, whether she said it, that she can recognize whether her characters are extroverts or introverts. And I thought I know. See, look at your face. That's exactly the same face I had yesterday. And I've never thought of my characters whether, because I always ask the question in the podcast, but I've never thought that of my characters when I'm creating them. And it was literally like a little light bulb went off in my head, and it's given me like a different way of thinking of them and thinking how they interact with other characters. And I think my whole point is that no matter how many books you've written, whether you are, book 1, book 4, book 25, it is a continuous journey of learning, which I think is good for new writers to know. They don't feel like, oh my God, there's only one way of doing it.
Definitely not only one way. I think there's as many authors that there are existing on the planet. There are ways to do this. I think there's no set way at all. I think you're right. And actually, as you've just said, my methods have changed a little bit as well. So depending on my situation, and I know I have no children at home now, so I structure my day in a much more fluid way now. But I think I love the fact that about the characters being introverts or extroverts. And actually, I now know that I don't have to start my book today, because I can now go through all my books that I've written and work out which characters are extroverts. And which...
I've given you a different way to procrastinate.
Absolutely.
No, but isn't it really? I just think it's really interesting. I mean, maybe other people have done that, but I've just never. I mean, I always say I have my characters, and I always my intention is always for them to be fully formed, for them not to look flat on the page, and for you to feel that, when you meet them on the page, you could easily imagine yourself sitting in a pub, it's always a pub, sitting in a pub with them. But the idea of them being an extrovert or introvert or a hybrid, it's just, it's just kind of like flip the script on me a little bit. And I like it. I like learning these things.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And I love the extrovert introvert question as well. So
we'll find out
my opinion on that. Well, I'll wait till
So, Amanda, how do you keep yourself going? I think that's the question I like to ask now, especially in those early days when we think we're going to be superstars. As soon as it lands on the agent's slush pile, I should say, when they're inbox, and it doesn't happen. So you're having to deal with, rejection. And there's some people who they never they've never experienced rejection at all until they get to that point. So it's like, how? No, but I think I must have spoken to someone on this podcast, and they were like, no, like they'd had no rejection until they decided to embark on this journey, and it was such a shock to them because they've never developed the tools to manage it. So it's like, how do you keep going when, back in the day, your manuscript was coming back?
Yeah. So in terms of publishing, for me, which I was very optimistic then. I knew I wasn't scared. I think so. A good thing about my character is I'm not scared of hard work, and I'm not scared of. I like a bit of hard. I do genuinely like. I've had a very charmed life, but I've definitely always been told that you work hard whatever you do. It doesn't matter how privileged you are, you work hard in everything. So I think the hard work didn't scare me. And actually, when I had a little bit of rejection at the beginning, because I didn't want to be furrowing, I had this real idea that if I wasn't any good at it, I wanted to know. Like I wanted someone just to tell me, this is not for you, go and try something else. So, I was 20, I was in my late 20s. I still felt quite young. And I sent my manuscript off to one of those independent editors for them to tell me what they thought of it and to give me advice. And she wrote back and she had lots of things to say, and it was all very, very helpful. There was a single sentence at the end which said, having a book published requires hard work, talent, and a little bit of luck. And I remember printing that out on a sheet of A4 and putting it above where I wrote, because for me, that was like, and she basically, the sort of punchline of that was, you've got the first two, you just have to hope for the third now. And I thought, actually, that was very inspiring for me, because it sort of meant she had given me a bit of a pat on the head about having the ability to write. Yeah. And I had proven that I had the sort of, I suppose, determination and doggedness, I guess, to sit down and write. And I just needed to wait for that manuscript to hit the right desk. And actually it was borne out by the fact that I had two on my second book that I tried to put out. I had two letters come back within 5 days of each other. One said, so the basic story is that this family have lost their 16-year-old daughter in an accident. She's been killed. And they said, I absolutely bought into the father's grief, but I didn't identify with the mother at all. And the next letter came back and said, I thought you wrote the mother's grief really effectively, but I didn't believe in the father's grief. And I just, at that point, it was almost like the universe had sent me proof that this was not something that I just had to wait for the manuscript to arrive with the right editor at the right time, who saw what I was trying to do, and then we would work on it. But it was the most remarkable. I still have the letters to this day, because it was just, for me, it was like, and I just remember looking at them both going, what can you do? This is out of my control. One of these people has responded to one character and one of them has responded to the other, and they both didn't respond to the alternative character. So
it's validation in so many different, and I think you always need validation as a writer. Even you can be the most confident person in the world, you go through your life, happy as Larry, you get things done, nothing bothers you. But when you're embarking on this journey, you do need some kind of validation, but then also you do need a message from the universe saying this is a lot of nonsense as well. Like, really?
Yeah. And actually, because again, I was quite young and I really wanted to do this. So actually, although I was frustrated by that, I actually said, fine, clearly my male character is causing a reaction in people, and clearly, but so actually that's two bits of positive feedback.
Yeah, it works.
Admittedly, so it worked for me. And I think, the other thing that I'd said, and I say this to other people who are trying to get published as well, or at least I used to, which is, at every stage, I think I worked out that the statistics were huge. So if, in terms of being against you, the number of manuscripts that are arriving on the number of agents, and, this was a huge number compared to the number of new clients that an agent signed, for example, and of those new clients, only a certain percentage would get a deal. So I think for me, I tell people and told myself that every single time, so if someone rejected me, so say I sent out my first manuscript, I sent it out to 5 agents. 4 of them said no on the partial, but said we'd love to read the whole manuscript. Now I took that as a massive plus, because I was like, well, someone somewhere has likes my writing enough to say they want to read the whole book. And then the next time I got asked for 2 full manuscript read-throughs, and then someone signed me. So I think I sort of say to people, every single time you get a little bit of feedback that's beyond your form letter rejection, then hold on to that and know it's just a matter of time and hard work. Maybe that's idealistic, but it kept me going at the time.
I don't think it's idealistic at all, because I remember mentoring a writer, and she sent her manuscript off to an editor. She sent her manuscript off to an agent. I told her not to, because I'm like, we're still working. It's not ready. But I understand that feeling of, you finished it, and I said, you need that kind of, that first moment of, I finished it. Someone wants it. It's going to be big. So I understand the energy in sending it off. So she sent it off, and she got the rejection. She got like a slew of rejections. But then one of them was the rejection, but it wasn't the pro forma, thanks, but no thanks. It was detailed feedback. But she was so focused on the rejection that she couldn't acknowledge the feedback. And I said to her, the feedback is good. The feedback is, they've read it, and they can see something in your writing. So this is not a no. What this is take on board the feedback, incorporate the feedback, and then come back. They may not directly say come back, but it is an invitation to come back.
Yeah, and the way I would read into that, which is exactly obviously how you read into it, is that writer, it's worth her pursuing her dream, because something in her writing, or his writing, has caught someone's attention, and therefore they have the talent, presumably, with, as I said, as that famous person said to me, a little bit of hard work and a little bit of luck, and hopefully things work out. I mean, it's obviously not that, as I said, it's not that, it's not that easy and straightforward, but I always do look at that as a thing.
I think it's hard. I think we can get so distracted as writers. It's hard. I don't know whether I am mid-list. I don't know where I am. I mean, I know I'm not up on the high bit. But I wouldn't even say I was mid-list. I'm just floating around somewhere. I'm just floating around. But I think you can get so distracted by by the external noise that surrounds being an author, and the external noise is the bestsellers list and the book club stickers and who got the latest deal, who's on the front page of the bookseller. That is all the external noise, and you can get so distracted by that, and it can be so frustrating that it stops you from doing the thing that you originally wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah, and I definitely have changed my attitude to that. So I did get distracted. I sort of, you also, as a writer, if you're someone who makes writer friends, or that's important to you, it was to me, and I wouldn't be I wouldn't have my sanity if I didn't have my writer friends around me. But definitely help. But you move through as a cohort, and some of you get great success, and some people fall away, and I think. I think the noise is very distracting. But about 3 books ago, I decided, it was a very conscious decision, and I have tried to keep to it, that I joked about it with myself, but I called, this is my Zen attitude now to publishing, and that I wouldn't let that stuff, because we all know that envy is for me, envy is a very destructive force. I don't like myself envying people. I want to be the type of person that's happy for everybody, and I want people to be successful. And also, in publishing, dare I say it, someone else's success does not mean that you can't have success as well. There's no limited spots, and so I sort of felt that actually just cheering everybody on, and I've had a couple of friends who've been at book 11, book 12, book 13, and then suddenly had success. And I'm only excited for them. And it gives you that little bit of hope that, well, maybe that big breakout book is just around the corner. And I think you have to have a little bit of hope if that's what you want. But otherwise, I'm just very grateful at the moment, at my age, to be able to sit here and do this and be paid for it and enjoy it still. I don't enjoy it today, because obviously I'm looking at the I'm hopefully enjoying it in the next month. That's my plan. I
know there are some days you're just like, mate, let me just go and do something else in my life. This is not. It was a nice ride, but I'm off. I'm off the train. And then there are other days when you're like, sign me up for more. Like, I love doing this. But I was talking to who was I talking? I was talking to Maz Evans last week, and I said to her, I'm allowing myself like a little bit to indulge in like 10 minutes of pettiness. like a
Yeah.
week. If I see something and it's wound me up, I'm like, I'm gonna let myself be petty. Just like,
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
Don't think that I'm this
yeah,
like
just
sort
for
of,
10
you know,
minutes.
goodness sake. I sit there and I still get wound up and cross. I'm still like, oh, I can't believe they've done that. And also, you know, I can be very, very judgy if I let myself go. I just have to remind myself that this is not a good look. And
I know, yeah. This is why I'm like, put a timer on it. 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Pettiness,
exactly.
and you're done.
Yeah,
That's your
definitely.
pettiness done for the week.
Yeah,
Everything
and
else, you
I've
have to just let it go.
Yeah, and I've got one writer friend, one specific friend who, you know, if I phone her up and she phones me up, we know we're going to have a good old rant. So I think I've got that outlet to sort of say, and another thing that happened. So I do have, not a saint by any means, but just trying to control myself.
Yeah, it is all about control and not letting the noise completely take over. So, you know, when you're doing like your workshops and stuff with writers, what is the most common question they put to you?
Gosh, I mean, it's hard because I've done mostly children, and I have done some adult workshops, but they've been very specific. So I've done, you know, if I was doing a workshop, I've done a lot of character workshops, a lot of location workshops. So I think mostly, bless them, I think it's if you're dealing with people that are in the quagmire of trying to get their work read, I think that's the most thing, is that what can I do? How can I get my book out there? How can I get my book read? Please tell me what I can do to get this published or get this read, or what am I doing? And I think, you know, there's a lot of people I get as well. I get sort of, a friend, I'm sure we all get this, but, you know, a friend has just written a book and she wants to get it published. Could you tell her how to do that? I'm a bit like, you know, I just can't. I can't do that. We've all, you know, with varying amounts of rejection or success, we've all just traipsed the pavements and done our bit. There's nothing, you know, there's no nepotism involved, unfortunately. You can't do that. And it breaks my heart because I know how frustrating it is. But, you know, and it's very trite if someone's desperate and someone's been rejected and it's wearing them down to just sort of say, oh, just keep enjoying the writing, just keep going on. Because I think that's you know, it's not an easy thing to hear, is it?
No, it's not when it's your dream as well. It's your dream,
that's
what you want, and you feel like, you know, it's not your intention. You don't plan to, but it feels like you're crushing on someone's dream when you're saying to them, you just either just have to keep on going, or you might have to put some more work in, but just keep on going and keep on writing. And it may not. And I think as well, I think it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Like telling people, having people realize that it may not be this book that is going to be the one that's going to get you the contract, that's going to get you the deal. Even though you may love this book and this is the one you've poured everything into, it's possibly going to be the next one or the third one. That's the one that's going to do it, and to encourage them to just keep on going.
Keeping on. And that's all you can do. And that's, I think, if it is your dream, and don't, you know, there's an element where you have to sort of say, as much as you've just said, as much as I love this book, as much as I believe in this project, it's time now to put this one under the proverbial bed or under the actual bed, and just sort of say, but I'll take everything that I've learned from writing that book, and I'll start again. And it's a tricky one, but
it's like what we were saying earlier though. Nothing's ever lost. Not really. All those words you've written, all those characters you've created, all those pieces of dialogue, it's not lost.
Well, my book 3 was actually my book 1, not the one that's underneath the bed with the my next book. So we tried to tell that. I got an agent with that one, but we couldn't find an editor for it. So she said, look, let's put that one aside. You go away and write another book. And then my book 3 was and the one that I went away to write got published. Then I wrote my pesky book 2, as I call it, and got that one out. And then my book 3, I went back to that one that had found me the agent, but not the editor, and I reworked that. And that was actually that was the one that was sort of the most successful of the 3, which was because I think it had. I often look at it and I think it had all that passion of a first novel. It had all that of excitement and there was no expectation on me because no one was asking for anything or waiting for something. And then I put it back into it. I looked at it with the sort of the slightly more savvy eye of someone who'd published 2 books and who knew what they were doing a little bit. So actually, I you know, that worked for me. So I would always say, you know, put it away, but be excited that you might be able to come back to it at some stage and make it great.
because you have that maturity, not necessarily as a person, but you have that maturity as a writer, and you
Yeah.
do look at it with different eyes. You look at it with a writer's eye, and you look at it with an editor's eye. And then
Yes.
if you are thinking that far ahead, you are thinking of it with that, okay, the marketing eye
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So all of these, it's like that trifecta kind of comes
Yeah.
together, and you're able to do it. Right, Amanda, I'm going to ask you, what number book is this? I'm holding it up. I like doing this bit.
Oh, that is Beautiful People, and that is number 7.
Is it
Number
7?
Yeah, number 7. I
Would
think
you-
it's number 7. Number 7.
Well, you should know, because like I was trying to work it out, and I'm just going to ask Amanda.
Yeah. I know, it's one of those things where I think it's number 7. No, it's definitely number 7.
Okay. Would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about Beautiful People, book 7?
So Beautiful People is set in dual timeline, and it is the backstory, which is set at the turn of the millennium time, is a group of people at university. We've got Victoria, who gets into this very prestigious university architecture school in London, and she becomes bedazzled. She falls in love with one of her classmates, her housemate, and becomes bedazzled by his group of friends. They are very confident, very glittering, very well off. They inhabit a world which she has never thought would ever be accessible to her, and she sort of changes herself to fit in with them, but primarily with this desperate love affair, unrequited love affair with her friend. And then we shoot forward sort of 25 years, and she's now a portrait artist living in Paris, and she has been commissioned to do a very extravagant portrait for a Hollywood movie star who is marrying a rather well-connected man who happens to be one of the circle of privileged people that she met when she was at her university. Something dark had happened in those days, and she decides to go to the wedding. She's invited as the artist of the painting, and she goes back to confront the horrors and relationships, first love that she had back in the day, and it all goes a little bit wrong. So I had basically, really quickly, I had decided that because all my books at the moment, the last 4 books have been set in Cornwall. They've been very emotional and sort of quite heavy going, I guess, in terms of emotions and subject matter and bits and pieces. And I had just watched White Lotus, and I had decided that is what I want to write. So that's, when we're talking about thinking about projects, I was like, that's what I want to be writing. I was excited by it. I love the mix of glam and dark humor and darkness. I've never ever been under any illusions that I could write anything that doesn't have darkness in it. I once told my agent, in fact, that I wanted to write romance, and she said, because I'd had enough of making people cry or making people feel uncomfortable, and she was like, oh yeah, go on then. And I wrote I wrote to her about 8 days later. I went, just to let you know, I'm on page 7 and I've just killed the heroine and I'm much happier. So I think
That's not love.
Oh no, it was not love at all. So that was the end of that dream. So with Beautiful People, I wanted to combine a slightly more glamorous and colourful and exotic and glitzy, I guess, feel to the book. But then obviously the darkness comes through, because that's me. So there's a dark back history, and it comes to rear its head. It has funny enough, it came out just after Saltburn, and there is a very similar sort of vibe to that, to those university days and thing. But I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's possible that our narrator isn't quite as straightforward as she seems.
That's what we like, a little bit of unreliability. All right. Right, Amanda, I'm going to ask you your last set of questions. Are you an introvert or extrovert, or a hybrid of the two?
I would if you'd have asked me up until 5 years ago, I'd have said extrovert, no problem at all. Give me a party, give me a table to dance on, give me I'm just there. But I now know that I am, I think, what's called an extroverted introvert. Any party I go to, I used to smoke, and I used to think it was because I like smoking. It isn't. It's because I used to like getting out of the party for 10 minutes to have some peace and quiet with people. If I have a party, even at my house, or even have people over for dinner, I will always find me for 5 or 10 minutes just in my room on my own, quietly, just recharging. So I think and also I will invite hundreds and hundreds of people. I'll say, let's do this, let's do that. And then if someone phones up on the day and says, I'm afraid I can't make it, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. So I think I definitely get all my energy from being on my own.
Yeah.
I get bored of the sound of my own voice. I get bored of needing to sort of be everywhere, but definitely give the impression of being an extrovert. But deep down, I'm an introvert.
All right. So what challenge or experience, and it can be a good one or a bad one, but what challenge or experience in your life shaped you the most?
Well, I feel a bit of a fraud answering this because I've already answered it really, and it was definitely not a traumatic experience. It's the opposite, but it was absolutely having my baby unplanned when I was that age. As I said, I've talked a lot about it, so it made me change. It changed me. It made me rethink everything that I had sort of got planned for myself. It threw an obstacle in the road, which turned out to be the very best obstacle ever, but it was something I had to work around, and I actually ended up shaping who I am now is very much shaped by that detour.
Okay, so if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
So again, it's the same time, isn't it? I would love to give
the same time.
I would love to be a little bit different. Maybe we'll say, I think for me, I don't want it was a good time, but there were moments where I was sitting in that basement flat feeling like my world was out of my hands and out of my control, and this wasn't what I wanted to do. So I had a 1-year-old baby, and as I said, all my friends in my eyes were doing these incredible things, and I was very stagnated. And I just want to go back and just say to myself, try to say this without crying, actually, I just felt a bit choked up, but I put my arms around myself and say, this is the very best thing that could have happened to you, and it's all going to work out. I cried. Oh my God.
You did. Don't worry, we won't show it. We won't show Amanda's tears.
Yeah, so that just to say, this is all good. Life is good, and she's important.
Okay, and you're gonna make me cry now. So right, no, let's do the non-crying bit.
Yeah,
what is your non-writing tip for writers?
So by that, do you mean like not the sort of process of being in front of one's computer?
Not the process. So it could be have vitamin C supplements.
Yeah, I mean, I think find, and again, I'll probably be repeating. I know you talk to lots of authors. I'm sure you've heard this before, but find your crew, find your support system. Find the writers, not that you want to be friends with because you think they're going to advance you or that they're good or this or that. Find those people that really get you, that make you smile, are able to be sincere, and that have got your back. So someone that if you had a really good thing happen to you is going to accept that news with joy and love and just say, God, I'm so happy for you. This is amazing. You've done it for us. So find your crew, get out and walk. If you're blocked, go out, have a walk, touch grass, as the kids might say. Get off social media if it's got its claws into you. And I'm not one to lecture on this because I'm terrible, but just, keep space, keep grounded and put everything in perspective. These things, and everything changes on a sixpence. Oh, and one more bit of advice I would say, which I haven't done, is if you have a moment where someone phones you up and says, I've just had a producer read your book and we love it, and I'm now enjoy it, because I spent a lot of time being, I can't talk about that to anyone, I can't do that because I can't enjoy it, and then nothing happens and you're like, oh, I didn't really get the joyful bit of that. So now I really say, if someone rings me, I've had someone read the book and they've on Beautiful People and they've said, I really loved it, I'm a director in LA and I'm going to give it to my producer. I'm like, do you know what, I'm going to enjoy that, because I know it's not going to come to anything. But I'm going to enjoy it for the moment and just think that that's a nice feeling. So enjoy those highs for everything they are, and try not to let the low bits get you down.
I agree. And finally, where can listeners of the conversation find you online?
So I'm not as much on Twitter anymore. I tried Blue Sky, but that didn't work. So you can definitely find me on Instagram, seems to be my favourite. I'm there, and you can always contact me. I reply to everything. So if anyone messages me on any of those platforms, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, I will always reply. I made that a promise to myself when I started out. So I love talking to readers. I love answering questions. So yeah.
Well, Amanda, that just leaves me to say, Amanda Jennings, thank you very much for being part of the conversation.
Thank you ever so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.